Good evening, everybody. Norm Potter here, hosting Educational Norm. I'm glad you are here joining me tonight or tomorrow morning. I'm not sure where you're watching this, but I'm glad you're here. That was the Island Song by Nick Zuber. Based on all the nasty weather we've been getting here lately, I thought it was appropriate to think about the islands and maybe grab a umbrella drink or two if you're out there. So welcome. Tonight we're talking about writing across the curriculum. And this is something that is near and dear to my heart. I've done it on several occasions in different districts under different circumstances. And I think that I can talk from firsthand experience on things that work and things that don't work. So I hope that you get a lot out of this 10 minutes tonight. And as always, feel free to contact me if you want further information. And I have been getting emails here and there from people watching to see if they are understanding what I'm trying to say. So tonight with writing across the curriculum, let's get started with the basics. A lot of times when writing across the curriculum comes up, it's based on need, based on the data that you receive from the state or from just local measures or whatever it may be. And so when you're looking at that data, it's sometimes hard to delineate exactly what is needed. So one of the things that we often look at when we start checking that data out is exactly why are our students scoring low. And if you're in the state of Ohio, there's a threshold of how much content they need to make sure the students that are writing these pieces for the state test, they have to cite certain amount of information. But if they cite too much, they are marked down for not original content. So there's a fine line you have to balance. And I think that when you start looking for those different um, individual pieces that are really specialized, I think that you can start narrowing down your focus. So look at the data and decide as a district, a school, a team, whatever it may be, that this is something that we all have to do. It's not just a one person challenge. It's not just the department's challenge to get kids to have better writing. And it's not just writing scores, it's better writing. It's about communicating. It's about being effective as a communicator. So this is something that has to be done school wide. And if it's not being done school wide, I think it has to be done at least at the team level, the grade level. And so the very first time we ever did this was with a seventh grade team, and I was part of that team in the non-ELA area. And we went about it in the best way we thought we could do. And so we were using the 6-point rubric at the time in the state of Michigan. And so what we did is pretty simple. The ELA teacher taught the rubric and how to use it. And then we had a kid-friendly version taped on every single desk in the seventh grade. So no matter what subject they were in, they were expected to write to that rubric. And it became a good tool to have. And the students seemed to understand the process. But we didn't go as deep as the second time I was working with this. And this time it was a whole district initiative. And it did not make everybody happy. I'm not saying that it did. Especially when you think about the limited time you have in your essentials, your band and choir and art and those things, you usually do have limited time, and now they're being asked to do some writing as part of that time frame. And I understand the concern there, and there are some concessions that can be made here and there. But if we want the students to be able to write and communicate effectively, it really is a matter of we're all in this together. So once we have made that decision, here are the steps that I think that have to be made. We have to look at the rubric first off, and we have to, as teachers, understand the writing rubric. We can all be writing teachers without teaching English language arts. And so with that in mind, if you understand the basics of the rubric, allow your teacher, your English teacher, to teach the rubric in that first month of school, whatever, 4-week, 5-week period that you want to account for. The ELA teacher will show the rubric, teach the rubric, have the students understand what the rubric is trying to do. And you have to get to the point in that understanding of that rubric as a student, how to do self-assessments. That is the critical piece. You're moving from understanding what the rubric is looking for to seeing how it translates into the writing, to being able to assess yourself in that process. And once you get to that point, then and only then does it become an effective tool, the rubric, in other subject areas. As a science teacher, I can't expect the science teacher to grade or to hold students accountable for every aspect of that rubric, because they still have content that they have to be aware of. So what we were able to do with that rubric is, once the students are trained in that, and this goes back to the 6-point rubric we used in Michigan, with that being taped on there, the students, because they were so well coached up and taught by our ELA teacher, we could simply say, is that to a level 4? That was our cutoff where everything had to be. Or do you have to go back and fix something to get to that level 4 before you turn it in for me to grade it for content as a science teacher? And the kids most of the time would walk up with that sheepish look in their face, knowing that they are not where they're supposed to be with their writing. And they try to hand it in, and all you have to do is ask that question, and they'll go, no, and they'll storm back. So it really is a matter of everybody being consistent and truly understanding that rubric. So in that second scenario where I was talking about, where we're now in Ohio, we had a 4-point rubric we wrote across the district. We did have that common rubric, and in many classrooms and in many grade levels, I saw kids that had a copy of the rubric taped inside of the cover of their notebook. So every time they came to math class, they could simply just open up the flap, and there's the writing rubric. And that math teacher in particular was fanatical about the writing and made it her own, and created a way for the students to truly buy into it. And you may think, well, why are we writing? Especially Ohio now does not require writing on the math test. The reasoning behind math is also something that is measured in all the standards. So when you start looking at the standards, the reasoning process, why we do what we do, is something that can be seen very easily in the writing of a student. So that student, again, going back to the math example, everybody had a copy of the rubric. Every room should have a display of that rubric in their room so they can refer to it in a bigger form. Um, I mentioned having it taped to the desk. If you don't have it in the folder, they still need to have access to it so they can require the writing piece of your classroom to meet those standards. And I would recommend a shortened version or a kid-friendly version that you give them. You can go over the initial rubric, all of it, and have them understand it. But then you may want to just give them the top level, the bottom level, and maybe one level in between. This way, they're always shooting for that highest level. And in this case, when we are using the 6-point and we wanted them to be 4, we did the 1-point, the 4-point, and the 6-point expectations. And they had to meet those. It really was something that we held them accountable to. And eventually, not accountable, they were responsible. They knew what they had to do. And it really made it easy for us to do our job. I could say, is it a 3 or 4, or is it a 4? And if they said no, go back and fix it. Once it's fixed, now I'll grade it for my content. One of the first things that we learned is that nothing really changed in the students' writing. It was the expectations the teacher had in non-ELA courses. The math teacher that I spoke of earlier, she said that I always just let them write incomplete sentences when they did, a reasoning piece on their paper. When they got into the full sentences, there were times where she understood their reasoning and it made perfect sense, but their arithmetic was wrong. And so they were able to go through and figure out exactly and pinpoint the feedback that was required. A recommendation I would make is that with the ELA starting the process in that first month, go rotate. You can either do one of two things. You can have everybody all in, everybody writes all the time, or you can rotate through the different subject areas so you have time to plan. So that first month is ELA, where they're training this. The second month of school, it might be that the social studies will be the focus of the writing piece. And if social studies does that, if you think about, common elements of social studies, they could be rewriting the Declaration of Independence. They could be writing a paper, a narrative of the history events. So there are different things that you could definitely do in social studies that would be easily tied into the writing. Then maybe do science the next month, and you're writing about labs, doing lab reports, which are slightly different than the typical writing, but it gives you a different piece of how to write something that is about informational. And then you could also do in science, possibly, and I'd stay away from the report piece, because that can be something that can be done in any subject, but try to make it more specific. So you're writing an article that's about a scientific discovery, or write the science article about the experiment they did in class. And then last but not least, you can get into math and do the reasoning piece. and into your essentials, your art, your science, or I'm sorry, your art, your music, your drama. Those areas can also be hit. So again, the piece about writing across the curriculum really is the buy-in from the teachers and changing the expectation levels with great training of the students on how to use the rubric for self-assessments. If you want more information on how to write a good rubric, or you want to find a way to pare down the rubric that the states are using right now, contact me. We've done that several times. I'll be more than happy to help. So to round off this whole discussion, writing across the curriculum is all about buy-in. It's all about being able to share ideas, use common language, and talk the same language in regards to the expectation levels of the students. So I want to thank you for joining me here tonight. Try to pray for better weather so we get out of this rut that we're in with this rain. And I hope to see you back here again next week. And we'll have Nick Zuber play us out here with Island Song. But as always, be kind, be professional, and find solutions. Have a good night.